Welcome everyone to the latest TELEMEDIA vodcast with me, Jarvis Todd, publisher of TELEMEDIA magazine, and the real expert, Mr. Paul Skeldon, who's the editor-in-chief. This is where we take a quick run through of a couple of interesting stories that have come across the desk this week that you should be aware of if you are active in the world of telemedia. And the vodcast today is all about the changing face of payments, with Pix driving subscription growth and Juniper Research highlighting our varied consumer payments need to be now. We look at what today's payment market means for the telemedia industry. So, Paul, first story was consumer payment predictions, agentic commerce, bank-backed wallets, and click to pay. This is some research from Juniper that shows how the market is really shifting fast. Tell us a bit about this.
Yeah, well, they our friends at Juniper Research do a lot about payments. I think they pulled together the sort of trends they've seen in the market, and it made interesting reading, I thought, for anyone connected with telemedia, because I think it sort of really underscores how the way consumers pay for stuff is changing. It used to be, particularly in the kind of stuff that we deal with, it used to be like carrier billing or possibly cards. There's sometimes been issues with cards. Now there's a whole host of ways to pay. Agentic commerce, which we talked about on vodcasts previously, where AI agents sort of find services and pay for them, are likely to be quite popular, according to Juniper. Chat GPT has its embedded checkout and all that kind of stuff. That's all happening, and that's often more in the kind of e-commerce world. But I think it does have a bearing on what happens in telemedia, because I think it will start to be that people use AI to find telemedia sort of content services and pay for them. It's a bit further off, I think. But what's particularly interesting is the fact that wallets and click to pay and account to account payments and things like that are really starting to become a much bigger part of the payment mix. In Europe, we covered back in the end of 2025 about Wero, which was a peer-to-peer payment thing that's become like it's worked in merchants as well. So it's an account payment service, a wallet for consumers in Belgium and Luxembourg and Germany, I believe. Just it's a wallet and people are using it to do micro payments. So it's kind of setting itself up to be the kind of place where people maybe turn to pay for the kind of content services we see in telemedia. Likewise, another story that was out last week as well about Pix, which is a wallet service in Brazil. It's massive in Brazil. They love they love mobile wallets. But what has happened with Pix is that it started to be used, I think, called Pix Automatico, which is used for subscription services.
Yeah.
And it's done like massive business for Nord Security, which is like a sort of computer security thing where you subscribe to it. I know it's not quite a telemedia service, but I think it's quite illustrative of how successful it can be. It already now, this Pix Automatico accounts for 28% of the payments that Nord Security get for their subscriptions, which, yeah, that's more than a quarter. It's coming from a wallet that, 2 years ago no one had ever heard of. So I think there's this idea that wallets are becoming a much more important part of payments. Similarly, the click to pay kind of thing, where you've kind of got a preloaded card in a payment service. Visa do it with Revolut, among others, where you just click to pay. Account to account essentially is also becoming really big and popular. And I think what's yeah, go on.
Well, and of course, I mean, one of the sort of common themes with all of these new payment mechanisms is that whereas the great selling point for DCP, and it is for DCB, the sort of idea of, it's instantaneous, it's simple, it's frictionless, and all that sort of thing. These payment mechanisms offer exactly the same benefits, if not a little bit better. And I think one of the other points that was quite interesting was on the PIC story, was that Brazil is quite a competitive market, and that it's sort of almost being this is almost the kind of test bed for what if it's successful in Brazil, and it certainly seems to be, that it's certainly going to be the case that similar models are going to start spreading globally as a result of this, because it's not going to be too long before it starts to break out from just Brazil. That's fair to say, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we already see sort of a similar thing happening in India, with its UPI payment sort of wallet that's really, really popular. We've talked about that before because that was sort of essentially developed with government money just to essentially bank millions of unbanked people, which has the upshot of generating more tax revenue for the government and therefore paying for itself. So we're already seeing that. I think, though, because of things like this Wero wallet that's taking sort of some market share in Europe, we're starting to see a move towards more people, particularly people, young people who are kind of unbanked. They're not totally unbanked, but they're sort of low value, but have money to spend on stuff like this.
Yeah,
It's starting just to make the argument clearer and clearer for wallets.
yeah.
The important thing to note is that this doesn't mean that DCB is over or it's a
No, no.
really to DCB. What comes out very clearly from the Juniper research is that it's no longer about sort of either or. People are going to use all sorts of different payment tools to do all sorts of different things, and they may well pay for the same thing using different ones depending on where they are and how they want to do it, and what their sort of
Yeah.
situation is. So really what it shows, I think, is that there's a massive need for payment orchestration for like aggregators and service providers and people like that, where someone can actually manage all these different payment rails and plug it in and make sure that they're collecting. I think it's interesting as well as to how the whole kind of telemedia model will shift. It's not just about carrier billing backed content services. It's going to be about payment backed content services.
And of course, if any merchants, advertisers, acquirers want to meet companies that can make this happen, of course, Telemedia in Marbella on the 4th to the 6th of October is the perfect place to be. We've got a couple of sponsored conference sessions run by Solaris and Next Gen Payments, both of whom would fit into the orchestration category. And I think the other interesting thing about this sort of broad, I mean, I do see it as a massive opportunity for the telemedia industry because, whilst having a breadth of payment options is clearly important. Some will work in some countries and some will work in others. But in the countries where this sort of A2A single click PIX type solution will work, it does offer cleaner, cheaper, and more reliable payment solutions. And I think particularly that whole margin issue is going to be something that people are going to really, is a really great opportunity for the telemedia industry because obviously DCB does have any critics. It's about the margins that the operators will be taking. So they're certainly going to be coming under some pressure to bring those down as more alternatives come online.
Absolutely. I think as well it legitimizes to some degree. If you look at it the other way around, it sort of it cements how carrier billing is now just one of these convenient micro payment methods. It sits there with wallets. In fact, you can charge your wallet using carrier billing in certain circumstances. Yeah, I think it sort of cements carrier billing as a key part of this. It will force operators to look at their revenue share. And yeah, I think overall it does make the whole market a much cleaner, more efficient, and more mainstream thing. And particularly the cost of living crisis continues worldwide. People are going to want like snackable little bits of content, little bits of access to this, that, and the other subscriptions to streaming services, that kind of thing.
Sure.
TCB is definitely in there as one of the ways to pay for that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's wrap that up there. Thanks for your insight on that one, Paul. It's worth reminding everybody that if you want to read these stories in more detail and a whole bunch of others focused on content marketing, payments, and everything else that goes within the telemedia value chain, then all you need to do is visit telemediamagazine.com on a daily basis, and you can get your telemedia fix right there. So for now, Paul, thanks very much, and I'll see you again on the next podcast.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.